I think the only word that comes to mind here, watching your interview with him, which was terrific, is appalling. In terms of his lack of substance, his lack of deep thinking, his failure to answer really serious questions like the one that you asked him about, what is the implication of your turning up in this ISIS video? Because you've said very hurtful things that really can encourage people to join ISIS, and how do you deal with that? He doesn't have answers to these questions or any serious questions, and I really just find myself thunderstruck that we're at 2016 and at this point.
But what I heard in that interview that was new to me was he was going after Ted Cruz.
On immigration, saying he was weak on immigration.
They've had this very ostentatious love fest, the two of them so far, and then in the last debate practically hugging, and now you hear Trump actually finding a line of attack. And interestingly, we're ending the year where he started his campaign with immigration, and he has a point in what he's saying.
Which
about
never
Cruz.
would have come up if it weren't for Donald Trump.
Right, he invented the issue of
But will
immigration.
Trump do
Haven't
it
you heard?
consistently? And that's been his challenge, because
Will he take on Cruz
He did go after
consistently,
Cruz in Iowa in December, and he actually started going down that road. But he couldn't keep it up because the problem is that Cruz is nice to him. He's killing him with kindness, and
the talk radio loves Cruz.
It's so hard.
Yes,
That's right. They're going for the same
It's so hard
voters.
for Trump to target somebody who's nice to him, and Cruz figured that out long ago. And so his approach has been very shrewd. Cruz has, which is you hug him.
Cruz fundamentally is a libertarian. He's fundamentally a guy who went to Princeton.
While we're talking
a social
about
conservative, and that's the portion of Cruz's support that I don't think Trump gets.
Yes.
Because Cruz is and you heard Trump actually sort of going after Cruz on the religion thing, which was very weird and a little bit race baity almost, saying that because he's Cuban, we can't be sure he's really an evangelical. But that is the portion, especially of the Iowa electorate, that I don't think is accessible to Trump for multiple reasons, and you don't hear him really trying to speak to, and so that's an advantage for Cruz, I think.
And what do the other candidates do to make some inroads, to make a claim to win the nomination?
It's going to be very regionally specific at this point, I imagine. And, as you guys all know, I mean, in New Hampshire, you have a particular quirky kind of race in which Chris Christie is doing very well. He's completely invisible in the rest of the country, but he's doing quite well there. And it's all this jockeying for third place, this idea that Jeb Bush needs to get into third in Iowa to be viable going forward. And I would say that over the kind of medium term, what matters is, who is acceptable to everyone. As guys get knocked out, kind of if someone finally says something sufficiently outrageous, and that's why Marco Rubio, who's been pretty underwhelming in early state polling, that's why he's still lurking and people still think of him as one of the big three, let's say, Trump, Cruz, and Rubio, because people still more or less finding him acceptable. People who are, let's say Jeb or Christie fans certainly do, but then also people who are otherwise Cruz fans, see him as, he's basically conservative, made this one huge mistake on immigration from their perspective, but that I think is going to matter more. And also this could be a race in which actually one can preserve one's viability after not having done well in the first 2 or 3 primaries. It seems likely to me.
Ruth, let me ask you about this terrorist video and Donald Trump's role in it. It seems to me that if we go back to this notion, Molly called it wishful thinking, that voters start to look at the candidates as president. This is a case, somebody would say, where Donald Trump's mouth had real consequences. Do you think there's any strength in that argument that anybody's going to be able to use this against Trump, this video, the fact he was used in a terrorist video, that has anything, or is this just another instance in which Trump supporters won't mind and it'll be fine?
I'm tempted to engage in some wishful thinking. The consequences of Trump's outrageous statements, which we could go on for 3 more hours, don't seem to be affecting his support among voters.
Right.
So it's hard for me to see that this one does. At the same time, I have been waiting to see and kind of hoping to see the electability moment happen among voters. You certainly hear that in past cycles from voters, particularly in New Hampshire, where they, Republican voters ought to be saying, it's our turn, we need the White House back, and they ought to be looking at Donald Trump and saying, he is not going to get us there.
How do the candidates raise that against Trump, which you haven't heard yet, but I think you will hear in the coming weeks? It's remarkable that on January 3rd, we are looking at a primary where it's entirely plausible that Donald Trump rolls and becomes the nominee, and it's also plausible that he does not win a single state. We just
in the general election, or
in the primary. We just don't know what's going to happen. We just